5 minutes later, we've got pocket tens under the gun +1. Under the gun raises to 30. He's an older guy who limped in previously from under the gun, so I take his raise here more seriously than I ordinarily would against a random opponent. I call. The hijack is another pro at the table who I've played with for years. She 3-bets to 210. It's a large sizing. Under the gun just flats. We can rule out him having aces or kings. The price I'm getting isn't all that great, and I started with less than 200 big blinds. I don't hate the idea of folding. I just don't want to do it. I call for 180 more, almost immediately regretting the situation that I put us in because we're never going to feel all that comfortable on the flop unless it comes 10-9 deuce rainbow. We've got the absolute nuts in a multi-way 3-bet pot that's already big for this game. Hold on tight, this is going to be a fun one. Under the gun checks. I check to the pre-flop aggressor. This isn't that great of a flop for her range, and it clearly is quite good for ours. I don't want her to check back. She doesn't. She bets 240. I love seeing opponents put money in the pot when we've got the best hand possible. It gets better as the under the gun player calls. With over 100 big blinds in the middle, we need to figure out the optimal way to go about this. If we call and slow play, the hijack will likely be very suspicious that she's beat, with 2 opponents calling her flop bet. She may even check back the turn with a hand as good as aces. We won't want any overcards to come out because we won't know which ones will potentially give our opponents a straight or a set, or will freeze the action. It can't be bad to throw in a check raise right now. I make it 700. This sizing completely handcuffs the hijack. If she has any overpair, she's going to hate the situation that she's in. It's 460 more for her to call, but she won't be calling. I only have 770 behind, so I anticipate the hijack folding or jamming. She's having a difficult time determining what to do. She must have an overpair of some sort. If she has aces or kings, I'd expect her to get it in since I may play this the same way up to this point with queens or jacks. After almost a minute, the hijack makes a disciplined laydown. If we were heads up, she might have called. The under the gun player picks up the slack. He calls for 460 more and has our remaining 770 covered. With 3/4 of the tens accounted for, I imagine he's going to show up with queens or jacks a lot of the time. A low turn would be great. The dealer puts out the 7 of hearts, completing an unlikely straight draw. Under the gun checks. We only have one option, and that's to rip it. We go all in for about 1/3 of a pot-sized bet. Under the gun is getting 4-1 on a call. If he has queens or jacks, like we suspect, he'll only have 2 outs. There's no snap call. I'm surprised that the opponent hadn't already planned out what he'd do if he faced what was almost an inevitable shove by me. I'm rooting for a call. After 30 seconds goes by, under the gun puts in a 1K yellow chip. We're playing almost a $4,000 pot with the second nuts and 1 card to go. The river is the 6 of hearts, putting 4 to the straight out there. I don't exactly love it, but I'm not too distraught because I don't see how the opponent would have an 8. I turn over top set. You're not going to believe what under the gun has, or maybe you would. We never actually get to see what he called us with as he turns his cards in face down. We get a huge double up plus an extra several hundred from the hijack. Just like that, we go from being down to being up almost $2,000. It's nice to acquire a yellow chip and watch the remaining orange and black chips come our direction as well. We've got the biggest stack at the table and we're not finished. 2.5 hours into the session, we've got 5-4 suited in the big blind. The player under the gun raises to 30. The small blind calls. I'm getting a price I like with a hand that has plenty of potential. We call for 20 more, closing the action. There are 3 of us seeing the flop. The dealer puts out 7-5-3 with 2 clubs and a spade. We've got middle pair, a gutter, and a backdoor flush draw. Small blind checks. I check. Under the gun bets 50. This won't be a great flop for his under the gun opening range. It's great for our big blind calling range though. We can have a straight, all the sets, and some 2-pair hands. Small blind calls. Calling and raising are both good options. Raising allows us to win it right now though. I bump it up to 220. The under the gun player isn't ready to jump ship just yet. He calls for 170 more. The small blind isn't feeling it. He folds. It's down to heads up. It's tough to know exactly what the opponent has. I'm guessing a flush draw or an overpair. The turn is the 5 of diamonds, giving us trips. A better turn couldn't have been dealt. That's one of the benefits of check raising as a bluff. Sometimes you get there. The new goal is to extract as much value as possible. I bet 430. It's a healthy sizing. Under the gun calls. I still put him on the same type of hands, but I hope that he has an overpair more than a flush draw because the river is the 8 of hearts. It's another card that's better for my range, although in reality, it doesn't change much unless the opponent somehow has pocket 8s. Under the gun only has 800 left in his stack. I consider checking to induce a bluff from a missed club draw, but it'll get checked back too regularly. I jam to get calls from premium pocket pairs or a non-believer. Under the gun immediately folds. He's flustered and snap picks up. We're having a great day with everything working out about as well as possible. It's another big pot that we get to rake in. We're up almost 2,700 on the session. Later on, we're dealt 6-5 of diamonds on the button. Under the gun raises to 30. This is the same player who 3-bet earlier when we flopped a set of 10s. I call, we're heads up in position, the flop comes King Jack 3, all diamonds, we flop a flush. Under the gun knows that having 2 Broadway cards out there will typically be better for her. She bets 30 again. I'm debating whether or not to call or raise. I call since we're in position and can ensure that it won't get checked through on the turn. The dealer puts out the 10 of hearts. Maybe Under the gun has a 2-pair better hand. She puts in a big bet of 120. This is interesting. For one thing, I'm not 100% sure that we've got the best hand. We've played this passively so far. Our hand is way under-repped. Under the gun could be completely bluffing, thinking that we've got a diamond draw or that we're relatively weak. If that's the case, I want her to keep firing for large amounts. I call again. We're just lying in the weeds, hoping that no more diamonds come out and the board won't pair. We get our wish. The river is the 8 of spades. It's a complete blank. Under the gun isn't very confident. She slows down and checks. Maybe she's trapping, or maybe she has a hand with plenty of value like a straight, set, 2-pair, or top, and it's giving me an opportunity to bluff if she thinks that we could have a missed ace-high flush draw. I bet 400 to make it look like I'm trying to buy it. Under the gun doesn't think for too long before folding. We win one more fun one. Since losing trip jacks, we've been on a roll. Here we've got ace-9 offsuit on the button. Under the gun +1 limps in for 10. When you're first in the pot, you really don't want to limp in almost ever, aside from when you're in the small blind. When I see this, I go into attack mode. I raise to 40 to isolate someone who I've immediately marked in my head as a recreational player. Under the gun +1 calls for 30 more. We're heads up. The flop comes Queen 7-3 with 2 spades. The opponent checks. I'll mix in checking or betting. I check with ace high since it has value and I'd like to see it turn to possibly pick up a flush draw. The dealer puts out another queen. Under the gun +1 senses weakness and bets 40. I actually didn't mind seeing the queen on the turn because it makes it less likely that the opponent flopped a pair. I'm suspicious that he could be bluffing with air. He took the same line against me in another pot and I folded. He's betting more frequently in situations than he's likely to have it. I call to see what develops. The river is the ace of diamonds. We drill top pair. We may have to be worried about trip queens after all because under the gun +1 bets 100. I didn't call the turn to make top pair and fold. I call again here. We were ahead the entire way. The opponent shows that he has ace-6 offsuit. He kind of bluffed the turn, then we both got there on the river, but it's confirmed that our 9-high kicker plays. Under the gun +1 gets a little punished for playing too wide of a range. He shouldn't really be playing offsuit aces below ace-10 from early position, and in some games, you won't want to play any offsuit ace aside from ace-queen and ace-king from under the gun and under the gun +1. If he were suited, he could have justifiably raised pre-flop with pretty much any ace. More pros are filtering into the game, and we look down at Queen 9 suited in the big blind. Under the gun +1 raises to 30. He's a good European pro. I call for 20 more. We're heads up out of position. The flop comes Queen 8 deuce with 2 spades. We've got top pair and a weak backdoor straight draw. We check. Under the gun +1 goes with a large sizing and bets 50. We won't be putting in a check raise here. We call. I'm already worried that the opponent is going to fire for progressively larger amounts and really put us to the test. The turn is the 9 of hearts giving us 2 pair, but Jack 10 gets there, and there's another flush draw to be worried about. I check. The opponent is relentless. He bets 120. The board could only get worse for us from here. We don't want to allow the under the gun +1 player to see a river card without putting more money in when we likely have the best hand. I raised to 400. Halfway wanting a fold because a lot of rivers will make us incredibly uncomfortable, including any hearts, any spades that don't pair the board, 10s, jacks, kings, and aces. If we get raised, I also won't be feeling too confident. Luckily, the opponent folds. That's the last big hand that we play. The game is getting tougher and tougher as more good players are replacing the seats of the recreational players. It's time to book a solid win.